Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to the second channel geography video. This is everyone's favorite series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I wanted to talk about one of the most fascinating parts of capital cities because I've been talking about capitals a lot. It's something I find fascinating and I want to talk more about because a lot of people, especially here in Europe, feel like their capital city gets way more resources, attention and development than it deserves. A lot of people feel like these capital cities are getting way too big because of this policy of like focusing all the resources on it. And this is why people feel like, London gets too much attention from the UK, or that Paris gets too much attention from France, or Brussels from Belgium, or Bucharest from Romania, or Vienna from Austria. A lot of people feel like these cities have too much of a population compared to the overall country because of this development goal. However, most European countries are actually really low down in terms of the percentage of their population living in this city compared to the population living in the rest of the country combined. And that's why I figured it'd be fun in today's video to talk about the countries with the highest population in the city compared to the population of the country. So the highest percentage of the population living in one city. Because one of the fun facts I learned as a kid that apparently it's not true is the Mexico City maybe at some point had 50% of their population living in the capital. Not true at all, so whatever book I learned that from was wrong. But I thought, that was so crazy to me that so many people would live in one place, but it actually goes a little bit crazier than that. But let's go into the top 10 and let's start with the 10th most populated country in terms of its city, capital city as a proportion of its total, which is actually going to be Barbados. So Barbados has around 39% of its population living in Bridgetown, Barbados. So this is Bridgetown right here, and the simple answer to why is it the case here is the same answer for a lot of other island countries, because when you have an island country, you don't have that much land area, and that means your city, proportionally to the country, is going to be pretty large. So again, the size of any city in any country is going to be again a tiny 0.1% or something of the overall country, whereas in the case of Bridgetown to Barbados, you can see how this is maybe 10% or something, and having 39% of the population living in 10% of the area isn't actually that crazy, and it's again, you can kind of understand that immediately right there, and that is Barbados right there. So yeah, just as a fun fact about Barbados, because again it's an island and it doesn't really have space to have multiple development opportunities for a city, so instead you get one big urban area, one big development point, where if you want to get a job or whatever, you go live there, and then instead there's a bunch of towns and villages around that you might want to go check out if you're ever in Barbados, but this is where the big urban area and the big stuff happens. So yeah, just while we're talking about Barbados, you probably are familiar with the country because Rihanna is from there, and also Mount Gay Rum is from there. I didn't believe that was a real rum brand, but it is, and it's from Bridgetown in Barbados. And also Barbados is interestingly a country which speaks English officially. It's one of these ex-British Empire countries that still has the Queen as their monarch, still officially speak English, but most of their population instead speak languages derived off English and native. It's interesting, but there you go, fun fact. The Queen is still the ruler of this country, where again around 39% of the population live in their capital, but it's not quite as high as our 9th entry here, which is going to be actually going to be the Congo over here. So there's two Congos, the DR Congo and the R Congo, the Republic of Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo. They're having a big war about who can be the best Republic Congo. But no, in all seriousness, there is two Congos because this one was majorly, again, the one-day borders don't quite line up with colonial things perfectly all the time, but this was mostly owned by the Belgians and it was run horribly, and this was run by the French and it was run, I guess, okay, you could say. But yeah, the Republic of the Congo is a country where around just over 39%, it's just under 40. Again, when you get these big estimates like this, it's really hard to work out the exact population of a city, the exact population of a country, and do it like that. But I just have the same numbers that I'm using for both to hopefully get a pretty accurate picture here. So just under 40%, it's 39.5% of people live over here in the live over here in Brazzaville, the capital of the Republic of Congo. So yeah, this city is quite interesting because it's the closest distance between, or again, depending on how you measure, but it's one of the closest distances between two capital cities in the world. Both the Congos have their capital on the same Congo River, fun fact, and although there's no proper way to get from one to the other, there's no bridge, there's sometimes regular ferry services, but they're not, that frequent, so you actually have to fly from one to the other. It's one of the shortest flights you can take in the world, fun fact. But yeah, why is Brazzaville such a populated city when, the Republic of Congo is huge? We can't say that same, oh yeah, it's an island country kind of thing, and the simple answer to that is that although the Republic of Congo is pretty big, I mean, it's not as big as its neighbor, it's pretty big, but most of the country, especially the northern part, is actually, if you look on a map right here, you can see it's tropical forest, so it's not that great for settling down, it's not that great for making these huge urban areas. And also, again, Africa notoriously has an infrastructure problem, but that's not quite so true in the Republic of Congo, but most of the infrastructure, which there's a lot of it, all takes place between Brazzaville and Pointe Noire. So, by the way, Republic of Congo used to be a French colony, which is why Pointe Noire, which I can translate for you with my excellent French skills, is I'm pretty sure, what is that, Point Black? I think that's Noir. Anyway, with that said, basically that is That is the where most of the infrastructure takes place, and therefore most of the urban development is on this corridor between these two cities. And again, that just happens to end with most of it taking place in Brazzaville, which was historically the biggest city, and again now has most of the urban area development going there. So there you go. Fun fact: that is why there is such a big city in such a large country, or such a populated city in such a large country, because most of it isn't really, properly able to be populated. Most of it's not properly linked up together, and therefore most of it ends up in one place over here, very, very close to the capital of the DR Congo. So let's move on to the 8th country with the most populated city as a proportion of its country. There's got to be a better way to phrase this, but for now, you know what I'm saying. It's actually going to be Uruguay. So Uruguay was a quite, a fascinating country to learn about, because I assumed most of the Spanish Empire was pretty populated when it split up, kind of similar to where it was today. However, even though Uruguay nowadays has 3.4 million people, when it went independent, it only had 75,000. So because of that, presumably, at least, again, there's some filling in the gaps here, because there's never, like precise things you can read about this and that, but presumably because of that, there was only 75,000 people in the entire country when they got independent, which was it was under 200 years ago now, when they went independent from the Spanish Empire, that was, and they got their own full little independence thing. Basically, they had such a small population that they had to get immigrants in, or didn't have to, but they did get immigrants, and most of the immigrants, when you move to a city for work, you presumably go to the big urban areas, which means that Montevideo, again, this city right here, has over 40% of the country's population. It's about 0.2% of the population, but around 40% of the population lives here in Montevideo, which is quite a lot. Again, it's an insane number. It's like 1.4-ish million of the 3-point-something million in the overall country. And again, the reason for that is because the country had to populate with immigrants from overseas. When an immigrant moves somewhere, they generally move to a city, and again, when a city then gets bigger, it attracts people from all over the country. And although some people then move out from the city, and although some people never move to the city, some people do go to Uruguay to, live in any of the other ones, these crazy cities around here, then most people go to the capital, and that means you get this big compounded capital effect, which you got in Montevideo. Also, it's worth noting, Montevideo is the 3rd southernmost capital city in the world, and the most southern capital of the South Americas. As you can see, it's all the way down here. The only two capitals that are lower down, in terms of, or further south, I should say, are actually Wellington from New Zealand, and also, oh jeez, don't know what's happened to that there, but also there's the Canberra, or Canberra, people get upset with my pronunciation of that one, from Australia. So those two cities are further south, but that means this is the 3rd furthest south capital city in the world, which is a pretty cool thing, and might make it worth visiting to you, and going to see a 1/3 of the country's population almost from these cities. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to, also, it's not like the largest of countries, which doesn't help to contribute to that one, but just a little fun fact about on there. So yeah, there isn't actually issues with land area in Uruguay. There just is issues with, they developed really heavily in one city, mostly of immigrants, mostly from Italy and Spain. So with that said, let's move on to the 7th country in terms of the you know what we're doing in this list. So let's go to Jordan over here, because Jordan is going to be the 7th one, which again has the same thing where it's not like it's a tiny country where you can just be like, oh yeah, the capital city is just a large part of it, although that is kind of true. As you can see right here, the capital city is a fairly large proportion of the overall city. However, in Jordan, around 41% of the population of the country live in this capital city, which is shocking because, again, I mean, there's quite a bit else going on. So, again, the reason for this is actually mostly to do with area, because even though the country as a whole is quite a lot bigger than the city, most of the country isn't really accessible. So, the Middle East isn't really known for its lush green plains or lush whatever you need to make a city. It's not known for that, and in fact, it's mostly known for just this. So you can see there's roads going through literally nothingness for most of the country, and although there's a few gaps for that, so there's a military airport over here where there's I think just over here you can see there's a military airport with a little settlement nearby, and there's a few things like that around the country. For the most part, most of the country isn't settled. The vast majority of it is this uninhabited place, and that means the actual usable country is fairly small, and therefore the same effect of like urban areas attract people. They generally have more population than the surrounding area. You know, a country's population isn't going to be evenly spread. A lot of it is going to go to the capital. That means that you end up with Amman, the capital, being very, very populated. Also, I know a lot of Ammans, but it's not the same as the people from the capital. So there you go. That is Jordan, one of the most stable and safe Middle East countries, by the way. If you want to visit the Middle East, but you don't like danger, I think Jordan's meant to be high up there as like like one you should go to. So there you go, that's Jordan, and also they're pretty friendly, I hear. So yeah, Jordan, just right there, just under Syria. I know it's like weird to recommend a country next to Syria, say like it's safe, but that just is a fun little fact before we go onward. So let's move on to the 6th example here, which is gonna be going back to, I feel like this shows up in almost every video in some form. It's actually gonna be Tuvalu. So Tuvalu was one of the very first countries I learned about when it came to like, because I had like an IT class where like you're gonna have to learn about internet in Tuvalu, and that was when I first realized there's a bunch of countries in the world that just have these like struggling like systems. And yeah, the population of Tuvalu is something like 11,000. It's the least populated UN member, I'm pretty certain anyway. And the thing about the country that's so interesting is it is just this atoll over here. So I think there's technically like a bunch of islands surrounding it and that belong to them too, but basically most of their population takes place here. And Tuvalu is a very fascinating country because they have not a capital city, not a capital anything like that. They have a capital atoll. So this entire thing is the capital atoll of Tuvalu. It's fun fatty. Again, you can't actually like properly click the whole thing here, but this entire, this is their airport for that atoll, their capital atoll. And again, the population of Tuvalu is absurdly low. So the population of their capital city, even though it's a tiny capital city, smaller than, or capital atoll, which is smaller than the place you live right now, I'm almost certain. Like, let me show you the size of this thing. This is their runway, which is like so much of their area. It looks beautiful though, doesn't it? Look at that. Isn't Tuvalu great? But yeah, basically, this is Tuvalu. This is their capital atoll, and the reason it's a high proportion is just a land area. I mean, it's an atoll. So atoll, by the way, if you don't know, I'm using that term a lot. You might want to say atoll. Again, you can use either. It's fine. But an atoll is like, it's an island, but the center is underwater too, so there's just little reefs almost. Like, instead of being an island where like lots of things above land, instead it's like little thin strips like this. I'm explaining it badly because I'm bad at the actual like explaining the difference between various islands. And there's a billion types of islands basically, and atoll is type of one where you can see there's like a lagoon on the inside too, and it's fascinating stuff. Although this is technically the sea too. Anyway, let's move on from Tuvalu, which is just like the same old like, well, that's the island situation, which by the way has just under 50%. It's about 45% of the population living in the capital city, to the next one here, which is going to be Suriname. So Suriname is fascinating because, again, it's a huge country, and you might be like, huge country, huge area. Well, same problem as before. Most of it is forest that is like, again, Brazil's had this problem for ages, right? Where it's just like, well, I mean, not much of that is habitable, and it's kind of filled with deadly animals. So, yeah, basically, fun fact about these countries is that, the south of the country is so, like, undeveloped that even though there are, like, little villages, you can see on the side here, for the most part, there is no infrastructure going south, which means if you want to go from French Guiana, which is, again, technically part of France, but let's not get into it, if you want to go there to get to the rest of Brazil, you actually have to like go like this absurdly, from the rest of Brazil, from this point onwards, you have to go like absurdly long ways around. And basically, fun fact about these countries is they're all linked, but not directly to Brazil. As you can see, there's no direct link across the border here, none at all. Same with the Guyana, which is the English protectorate. Basically, we got England, we got France, and we got like the Dutch here, which, by the way, this only went independent from the Dutch in 1975, and then also you got, like, mostly Spain, and then Portugal, and it's just kind of cute that you got, like, the former European powers, or their own little country here, and just something worth mentioning. So yeah, you go, Suriname, the capital is Paramaribo, or Paramaribo, that's the correct way to say it, as it turns out. It's a former Dutch place. It has a lot of issues in the one day, especially with hyperinflation, and I don't know, like, maybe you want to go there if you like former Dutch territories, and you like cities with a high proportion of the overall population. Assuming that's not your thing though, maybe, well, I mean, I guess it has to be a thing to enjoy number 3 here, because number 4 here is actually going to be the Marshall Islands. So we go back to the vague Pacific, or the huge Pacific Ocean, the vague nothingness, the huge nothingness of the Pacific Ocean, to go to the Marshall Islands. So the Marshall Islands is 29, if I'm not mistaken, separate islands. Again, if we click on the country, it's like, here is the islands. Hopefully that helps you. But no, basically there's one island, which is the capital. This entire atoll, again, it's an atoll again, is the capital of the country. It's called Mahiro, and as you can see, this is their capital, and it's the same easy explanation of like, well, Mahiro is their capital, and it's the only one of the... By the way, I was fascinated to like learn, like, why do people live on these far out places this far away from anything? Like, Hawaii's all the way over there, Australia's all the way down there, even Papua New Guinea's some way away, and the simple answer is like, they got there 3,000 years ago, and they just made a civilization. But yeah, Samihiro has around, by the way, I'll mention the stats here, around 25,000 people living there. I have to look them up over here because like I can't remember this exact number. Around 25,000 people living in Mahuro, as opposed to just under 50,000 or just over 50,000 living in the country as a whole, which means just under 50% of their population live on their capital island. Although they're cheating because they go for a capital island, but whatever. That's the Marshall Islands. They've got a museum and public library that's very prominent, as it turns out. So there you go, Marshall Islands. Just because, like, you know, I did it before. We'll show you like a little bit of the Marshall Islands so you can get a feel for life on this island. As you can see, it's an island. Maybe I'm being too harsh to these islands, but it's like, you know, it's hard to say too much about what's going on here. And I know this is the photo, but it looks like that entire house is just slanted. And you know, you heard it here first. The houses in Marshall Islands, or in the capital at least, they're slanted. It's definitely not the picture. It's definitely the fact that their buildings are like that. So yeah, that's it. Let's move on to the third now. The third most populated city as compared to the country itself, which is actually going to take us to the Middle East again. So everyone loves the Middle East, right? You'd never get offended when we talk about it, because that's totally real thing. Because we're going to talk about Qatar, which is actually especially it's political these days, because they recently got cut off by all their friends, or I don't know if you'd call them friends, but they got cut off from all their neighbors, there we go, in the Middle East recently, so you might know about that. Their airspace is limited, they got lots of problems, but yeah, Qatar is really well known because it's one of the, Middle East states which got that oil thing going. So yeah, they were a British protectorate, but they had a long history before that. Doha, their capital, has around... Again, I actually, like, the first estimate I looked up said 68% to 70%, but most estimates seem to be around 50%, so about just 50%, again, it's slightly higher, but slightly higher than 50% of the population live in Doha, the capital city of Qatar. So, same, or, again, Qatar is the generally said pronunciation, but apparently the actual one is Qatar. Again, say it how you want to say it. I'm going to say Qatar, or Qatar. I'm sorry, they're both, I guess, the thing about the English language, let's just go on a tiny rant, because people like to talk about my pronunciation. The thing about the English language is it's like, again, it's an evolving language. You say, when something, the official way to say so many ways is not the way you say them. So whatever, get off my back. Anyway, with that said, let's talk about Doha. So, Doha is the city right here. The reason it's founded there and the reason it got so big is because it's founded in these 3 bays, as you can see. Perfect place for shipping, perfect place to monitor. Basically, it's the perfect place to have a city, and given that their place is so small, and given that it's the Middle East, you can see how most fit forms over there. There you go, there's Doha, and there is the Qatar situation. Actually, just while we're here, because I figure this is worth mentioning, because I looked into it, and it was like, it's one of these headaches where it becomes a political talking point, and then you don't know the actual fact. So there was recently a big thing where like Qatar got cut off from all their neighbors for funding terrorism, and I was like, that has to be some political move, right? Why would you do that otherwise? But as best as I can tell, they actually kind of did. I mean, it seems like it's not even like a big thing, but like, Al-Qaeda said they got funding through Qatar. Hamas, which I don't know if that's offensive, so we'll move on. The ISIS even got some funding there. It's like, oh, that's not good, I guess. So there you go. There's Qatar. As far as I can tell, they did some bad things and they got cut off, and I don't know what the... but Al Jazeera is from there, so you gotta balance those things up. Anyway, with that said, let's move on to the second best example. I'm sure everyone loved that one, of a country which has most of its population in one city, with 70% of the population... By the way, technically the highest, I should mention, I'm excluding city-states, because 100% of Singapore's population lives in Singapore City. So, number 1, nailed it, but if you don't want to count that, Singapore's number 1, so is Hong Kong, and so is the Vatican City. But where's the fun in that? Can we say that? So yeah, with that said, let's go back to the Bahamas, because the Bahamas has, just over here, the Bahamas has a surprising amount of territory, like all of this is theirs. And the thing about that though, is just this island right here is their capital. Again, it's a capital city, but it's a capital island again. This is their capital, and the capital is where most of the people live, and 70% of them, in fact. And because the Bahamas is such a small country, fun fact, former British protectorate, fun fact, still have the Queen as their Queen. Always proud when that's a thing, where it's like, oh yeah, and they speak English there too. But yeah, basically this country did really well because of being so close to America. They have one of the highest like GDP per capita of like countries in the world, which is surprising for a Caribbean nation. But yeah, they do really, really well off being close to the US, especially during times like Prohibition, especially during wars, when they got rid of the British and stuff. And they also do really, really well from tourism. And the reason they do well from tourism is because swimming pigs. I mean, this is one of the reasons. It's a beautiful country, but the thing that the thing that you probably know is the swimming pigs, because you go to this bay on a boat and you can swim with pigs. And I actually looked into this because, and we could talk about the country and why they urbanized here, and simple answer, islands. So instead we'll talk about swimming pigs. They're way better. So the thing about, this islands, the reason it gets so much tourism, or one of the reasons, is because they have swimming pigs. And I looked into this because I was so sure this was Photoshop. Like, I did not believe there were really swimming pigs in, it's impossible to believe, right? Swimming pigs. No. But it's real. There are swimming pigs, and the official story is that they just one day wandered into the ocean and started swimming. But because it's happened nowhere else in the world, they're like wild boars or something. Because it's happened nowhere else in the world that you get friendly pigs swimming in the ocean. It doesn't make any sense. I'm pretty certain that like it was like or there's like a big theory out there that they did it to like boost tourism, but we don't know for certain. So there you go, swimming pigs. You can get them only in the Bahamas apparently. So go there and you can do that. Also, you might find an attractive lady to swim with you. So there you go. That is the Bahamas. There's not too much to say besides the island thing. Most of their islands, even though most of their land area isn't on this one, this is where they urbanized first. This is where they started building housing and stuff like that. Whereas if you look at the other islands, again, we'll use Google Earth for this one, you can see how like it's not too attractive to want to settle down there. Whereas here, it kind of is. So there you go. Fun fact about this. So let's move on from there now to actually go to the #1 country with the highest population as a proportion of the country in the world, if you exclude city-states. That's such a big preamble, but it actually is Djibouti. So Djibouti is pretty famous because they have a name which sounds a little bit like something funny if you say it in the weird way. I know that came up in the Olympics, but no, they're actually an interesting country because they were a former French colony. They still use the Djiboutian franc. I hope I'm even getting that pronunciation correctly. But basically, their capital city is also just called Djibouti. And the simple explanation as to why there are so many people living there is one I looked far and wide for. And the simplest way I can try and put it, again, this isn't perfectly accurate, is that Djibouti, of all the African countries, which are known for having a high population, Djibouti, even to this day, has less than 1 million people living in their country. It's something like 900,000, and around 70% of that population lives in the capital of Djibouti. Again, those numbers, they're in flux, but it's about 70% from what I can tell. Again, a little bit over, a little bit under, but it's around 70% living in their capital city. And why is that then? And again, the biggest explanation I can find is like it was really unpopulated before. They built a city and then people moved to the city, but they don't have the infrastructure thing. They have infrastructure across their country. They now even have infrastructure which links their country through Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken. So, they got like some cross-border traffic going on there. They had a railway before when they were a French colony. Why did they end up, in this situation where they have such a densely packed population? And I can't tell you for certain. Although it does mean they have a really, really urban population. Again, 70% of the population lives in this urban area. And again, so then you might be like, well, maybe Djibouti just does so well. It draws in people from the rest of the country that amazingly. It must be an economic wonder to draw in that higher proportion of the population. Because again, I mean, if you could move to your capital city and earn $1 million a year, because that was the average wage. I know that's an exaggeration, but let's say that was, you would. There's a price point for everyone, and maybe they just really nailed this thing. However, I then went and checked their unemployment stats because I was reading about something else to their economy. That it's not a very well-functioning economy, and their unemployment is 58%. I was thinking like, oh no, you must have said that wrong. So I get like 58%. Clearly, it's 5.8%. That'd be pretty good for the Western world, I think. But no, the unemployment rate in Djibouti City is 58%. This is from the CIA World Factbook. 58%. I didn't believe it. By the way, Congo is second, so African countries of high urban populations, they don't do well. Like, I assumed, like, the thing about an urban area is that you can have lots of jobs for everyone. In this case, 58. How does a country function with 58% unemployment? And I guess that's just a thing. Marshall Islands, by the way, fun fact, also on there. So it looks like all these countries that have these high proportion of populations. Anyway, let's just move on and finally say, I don't know the reason. I looked really hard and far into it. Like all these other countries, it kind of like built itself up and it explained it. But with Djibouti, it's just like, I mean, coincidence? But that's not a good explanation to me. So there is some reason why the high proportion of the Djiboutian population lives in Djibouti, and it's number one, so I really wanted to find a reason, but I can't. And I'd love to know in the comments down below. I'll pin a comment if it can explain it, and I can like look that up and it explains it properly. But as far as I can tell, like, shrug your shoulders is the best answer here. So thank you very much for watching today's video. I think before we go, because we're at like 24 minutes anyway, and I went on for way too long, I know like I'm rambling or waffling, whatever people want to call it, but I just want to tell you about fun facts about the world. The country with the lowest proportion of their population living in the capital really, really shocked me, because I thought it'd be one of these countries where they have like a fake capital. You know how like some countries have been changing their capital to have like a, oh, this is totally the capital, but not really capital. No, you don't know that. But no, basically the proportion of the country, the opposite of the thing I just said, is actually Washington, D.C. America has just 0.2% of their population living inside their capital, or 0.5. They have around 500,000 people living in their capital, and the reason this is the case, by the way, is because the capital district only accounts for this area right here. The city itself actually goes out much further. It's a really big metro area. It has about like, you know, 5%, or like, sorry, 1.5% of the population of the country living there. However, because the district, the actual city that is their capital, again, this is like a different state, so it doesn't count. It goes out a bit higher. So there you go. Fun fact, that's why. So yeah, America has the lowest proportion of their population living in their capital, and the highest goes to Djibouti. Or if you just want to like ignore that, it goes to the Vatican City, where 100% of their occupants live in their capital city, because their capital city is their country. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and I guess I'll see you all next time. Make sure you check, if you made it to this point in the video, I'm impressed, make sure you check out my sponsor, myself, at the Amazon link in the description, and if you buy things, I get some percentage of that. Wouldn't that be nice? And second channel, don't care. Goodbye.